welcome to another episode of Leading from Alignment with our good friend, John Opalewski. How are you today, John?
Hey, Jim. I'm doing really well. It's good to be with you today.
Yeah, I see you brought along a friend today. Why don't you introduce him?
I did. This is my friend, Andy Swart. Andy was introduced to me from a mutual friend, I don't know, maybe a year and a half ago. And we invited Andy to speak to one of our pastor peer huddles. And he presented on the subject of hitting the mark, when you communicate. And it was so powerful, Jim, that I thought we got to have Andy on the podcast to get that message, to get that content out to a larger audience. So Andy, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Hey, happy to be here, guys. Thank you.
Hey, Andy, take a minute, introduce us to who you are. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, just everybody. I want them to know who you are as you talk so they have a reference point.
Well, you can't know me without knowing that I am a family man. I've been married 16 years to my wonderful bride, Carmen. And we have 4 great kids, 11 all the way down to 3. So we're in that survival stage and just trying to keep our head above water in midst of, ministry and pandemic and all that other stuff. My background was that I'm a pastor's kid, but I didn't want to be a pastor, had no desire to be. When people would ask me, you want to be a pastor like your daddy when you grow up? If he was standing around, I would say, heck no. But I wanted nothing to do with ministry. And I made a profession of faith and was baptized when I was real young, but it was really in college. I played football at the University of Central Arkansas. Go Bears! We're in football season. And so I had a teammate who was a devout believer, and we would talk theology and Bible, and I knew all the right answers because I had a godly dad at home. And I very much could answer his questions. And eventually one night when we were at a away game, he was my roommate. He said, man, Andy, I think you've got all the right answers, but I don't think you truly love Jesus. And I brushed it off in the moment, but the Lord used that in a series of other circumstances that in the fall of my junior year in college on December 5th of 2000, was actually watching Billy Graham and the beauty of Jesus and the gospel just became alive. I was a moralist who played college football, was in a fraternity and didn't have a drop of alcohol, but yet I was lost and dead in my sins. And so when the Lord saved me, I didn't have a call to ministry. It was Lord, whenever, whatever, however. And so since that time for the last 21 years, I've been in vocational ministry in different roles. And the last 2.5 years, I've served as the teaching pastor at the Mount Church in Keller. Fun fact about the Mount, it is the oldest incorporated Baptist church in the state of Texas. And so we have a rich history, but the church went through a revitalization about 11 years ago, and I followed the guy that did the revitalization. And I love our church and our elders, our people, and it's great. We're right in the region of Lonesome Dove. If you've ever seen the series or read the books, that's literally right where our church is. So it's a great place to serve.
Andy, the teaching pastor, describe that role to us a little bit. I'm interested in what. Is it just what it sounds like, or is there more to it than just teaching? It is.
Most guys, idolize a title in some way. And so I will regularly joke that, I'm kind of more head of janitorial services or how I see my role, right? Like we get the church world, we get really creative with titles, visionary pastor and, pastor of, knitting homeless sweaters for kittens or whatever it is. Right. So, listen, I am what you would probably understand as a lead pastor. We don't have a lead pastor. Very much is built into our DNA as a plurality. And so, Jesus is the chief shepherd in scripture. And so we've just said, senior pastors, very much reserved for him. And so my primary role is I lead the church through preaching and communicating the vision. And so I spend most of my days leading alongside our other staff elders, our staff. We have a large staff, grateful for them. But my primary function is preaching and teaching. So that's about 45 Sundays a year. You add in all the extra stuff, and it adds up to quite a bit. But I love it, and thankfully the Lord uses me however he wants to.
Right on. That's too bad. I was thinking all you did was like for 6 days a week, you prepared one message quietly in your garden, you know what I mean? And then came out and the angels sang, there's a glow about you. And
Jim, that's what everybody
veil your face.
Yes, Jim, that's it, man. That's what everybody thinks. That is not a pastor.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is, but that's not a pastor. So
when you said teaching gosh, I thought, I want that job, talking to
Yeah.
people, hanging out. That sounds great.
Yeah. Don't be deceived,
How do you
brother.
know? You talked about vocational ministry and a call, it immediately wasn't there, but then you recognize that was part of what God created you to be. Tell us that story. Like, was it a moment where you're watching Billy Graham Part 2 where you, walking in a field or at the bottom of a cup of coffee? What did you realize?
Man, here's the thing I've kind of discovered is that the trajectory of my life, and I've seen this in the lives of other people, is that when the Lord is leading us to something, it usually isn't like a hard right turn. It's usually just like whatever the next best step is in front of you. And so I started off right after that saying, okay, Lord, whatever I can do. And so the Lord allowed me to first role in ministry was to teach a third grade boys Sunday school class. And I would prep. I was taking Greek and Hebrew at the time, and man, I'd study that stuff, right, and give it to them just to be faithful and to be a good steward, and whatever the next step of ministry was in front of me. And so, like a lot of guys, I became a student minister, did college ministry, and then in 2008, I planted a church in Northwest Arkansas. And so I was there for 11 and a half years until I left to come back to Texas. I have to say God's country because I am a Texan. And so, whatever that next best step was, it was right in front of me. It didn't seem like a big mystery or like, oh, okay, this is the direction God has for my life. It was just that whatever was right there that the Lord had for me.
Yeah, I love that. The dots connect, right? Every step
absolutely
connects to the next step, connects to the next step. That's brilliant.
Yeah, I love that. I think that for me too, Andy, if I could just connect to that for a moment, my call was very gradual. And it started at age 16, surrendering my life to Christ. And then the next best step for me was telling my story to somebody. And one thing led to another. And I found as a 17-year-old, I was pastoring people without even knowing what I was doing. And it was just that you've described it perfectly. I think sometimes we wait for the lightning bolt, right? That huge epiphany moment. And many, many times the leading of God in our lives is incremental over a period of time. So that's really awesome that you found that your way that way. I love that. As a matter of fact, I think that maybe lends to more stability. I don't know if I have proof of that. That's just a thought, that maybe that's a more stable way of responding to the call of God.
You become a shepherd, then you kill a lion, then you kill a bear, then you kill a giant. It's probably a nice progression, Yeah. So there's been a lot of changes, obviously in the last year and a half. I heard one guy recently say that he practiced for the whole 18 months by preaching to an empty church for 5 years prior to that. But it was no surprise, for him. It didn't change his habits at all. But I mean, I imagine in Texas had to do the same thing the rest of us did. And you had to switch the way you communicated. You had to go from a live audience to a lesser live audience or to a virtual audience. So the truly entrepreneurial person will find an opportunity in every environment, right? So what have you found? Like as we move forward, what are the takeaways that maybe this current environment has created for a communicator that are unique? That if we don't want to get trampled by the wave, we want to surf it. So so we don't get run over by this thing that's coming at us called the future that's costing a lot of guys their hope, and they're selling cars now. They're doing something else because of that. What has the wave done for you as a communicator to help you surf it rather than to drown you with it?
Well, Jim, I wish you would have asked a less controversial question. You should just ask whether we should mandate masks in service, right? I mean, this is the debate. The debate among ministry leaders is are things going to, quote, go back to the way they were? And even hearing pastors say that, I just wish things would go back to the way they were before, which, I think all of us would agree that things are not going to go back to the way they were before. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I think we have a place where everybody's saying it's all digital, all digital. Yeah. And so, I think, I can't remember who it was, Greg Atkinson, possibly, he said that it's kind of phygital, that we have to understand that ministry that we have is the person in front of us, but also very aware that there's somebody on the other side of a camera, other side of a screen who has a soul, is hurting, has needs, has questions about Jesus. And so really, I think the hybrid model is what is most effective in some way. And some guys, you mentioned the guy that was preaching to empty church for 5 years, is that, there really are people out there that are watching and listening, whether we have a conversation with them after the service. And so that should lead us to think about, okay, how am I addressing the fears of the person who won't come to the gathering on a Sunday morning or to a worship service? What are they experiencing? How are they understanding their fear in light of a God who's in control of all things? So, I think it's, that's right down the middle, right? Very political for this season, very pastoral, just right down the middle. But it has been a challenge that I feel like our church has navigated extremely well. They've responded well. We weren't shut down very long here in Texas. We took about 7 weeks. It was online only. And then we went back to it. And we've seen, of course, over time, we've seen a growth of our Sunday morning service attendance, and we've seen a decline in our online attendance, but it's still there. And it's still something to be very important about how we're going to minister to those people as well.
Right. And when you're communicating, I heard a leader say one time, where are you putting all your energy? And he says, we're putting all of our eggs in both baskets, which I thought was a neat. Exactly right. We're going to do our best we can in both arenas. But when you're communicating with a live audience and with an online congregation simultaneously, anything you've learned that would help? Because some people, they've talked to a group of 100 people their whole ministry career. Now they're trying to incorporate, this thing that doesn't give you the same feedback. Have you learned anything that's really helped you be effective when you're doing that phygital communication?
Yeah. So, this is not remarkable to the Christian world or to the pastoral ministry, whatever it is. There's a ton of things concerning body language and concerning looking directly at a camera, the effectiveness of that. We have a really gifted technical team, extremely thankful for them. And one of the things we talked about a lot was like, okay, what kind of shots are we actually doing? If you're limited by technology, do the absolute best you can. And I think the more close we can actually get to be able to see the expressions of a communicator online, to be able to see them look directly into camera, to see their passion, to see their appeal to the person on the other side of the screen. And you have to be very intentional to carve out those moments in a sermon to effectively communicate to them directly. Because listen, they will receive it and they will respond if we're addressing them. And they don't think that they're just, part of an online audience that, they're just getting it for entertainment in some way.
Right. Right. So treat them like they're there and there'll be more there. Treat them like they're going to listen to 5 years from now and they'll treat it less. Yeah.
Andy, you said something in responding to Jim's question that it's not on our list of questions, but you talked about pastors saying, I wish we could go back to the way it was before. We've heard a lot of that in our circles that we travel. And, we've come up with a way of helping, we think it's helpful to frame that thought process. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that whole sentiment of, I wish we could get back to normal, or this sentiment, before COVID, we were running this many.
Yeah.
And, I've heard that for 18 months. Can you, and I know I didn't prep you for this, but just give us your thoughts on how can we help pastors think differently about those items?
Well, the natural tendency is to go to what's comfortable, but what got us here won't get us there. And so I always want to tell pastors, no matter how long you've been in ministry, no matter your education level, you've always had to make adjustments in some way. And it's really getting outside of our comfort zone that we really begin to see that we're walking by faith. And the temptation is always there to do what we've always done. And maybe it was enough to, get the numbers there, whatever our focus is. But in some way, we very much have to see that this change in culture and what's going on, not just, in our own communities, but internationally, is an opportunity for God's people to walk by faith and to say, okay, Lord, you've brought this to us. How are we going to respond to this? We can be angry, upset. We can get in our holy huddles, or we can see that this is the greatest opportunity we've ever had in the history of the church to spread the gospel far and wide. And if that doesn't get you fired up, I would lovingly say to a brother, maybe you should go sell insurance or ice cream or something like that. But we have to be very sure that the reasons why we're doing it is to get the gospel out and not to build up online numbers, to pat ourselves on the back or whatever it is.
Right.
Yeah. I thought that one of the best thoughts I think that was communicated to me is look, it's time to move beyond this is what we were pre-COVID.
Right.
What we are now is the new baseline. And this is where we're starting from. We learned a ton in the last 18 months, but I'm not going to waste time and not going to waste energy living in an 18-month-old thought process or paradigm or pining for that, because you said it earlier, we're not going back to that. So I hope that's good advice or good counsel to pastors. Like, look, we appreciate the loss. We're not minimizing that. We're not marginalizing. You should grieve the loss, but there is a season of grieving, and then there's a season to move forward. And we're trying to get pastors to think moving forward more than looking back. Do you think that's wise from your perspective, or are we hitting the mark there?
Yeah, absolutely. Pastors, as a pastor, as the son of a pastor, as a man who has a heart for pastors, pastors are probably the most discouraged group in your church. And I always want to come back to, I've never met a pastor who's been overly encouraged. So many times our people will think like, well, I don't want to encourage my pastor too much because, that'll lead him to, have a big head. Well, my pride issue is not based upon the compliments I receive. That's a heart issue, right? So I want pastors to be encouraged that the Lord has given you, and I would say specifically you, not somebody else's ministry. He's given you this opportunity to be faithful with whatever you have. And that's easy for how we compare ministries and ministry size. Oh, if I had that technology, if I had the live stream, if I had, whatever it may be, I would very much just encourage that pastor that the Lord doesn't want you to have somebody else's ministry. He wants you to have your ministry and fulfill your ministry. So be encouraged, even in the midst of feeling off balance, feeling like we don't have the answers, feeling discouraged. The Lord is with us and he goes before us. And that very much, I think, has to be kind of the verse that we just kind of put under our pillow at night when we sleep.
Yeah, I love that so much. Well, Andy, I can't believe that we haven't even asked you about communication yet, because we've been asking you about all these other items that I think are really important. But would you hang out with us for another episode so that we can really dive into the communication aspects of preaching and teaching, what that looks like today? Would you be willing to do that for us?
Absolutely. I'd love to do that.
Okay, Jim, would you kind of wrap us up?
Yeah, I just want to do a teaser for next week, because Andy is going to answer the question, tell us the worst talk you ever gave. And I think that when pastors get together, that should be something we all discuss. Not what's the largest audience or what's the most hands raised or the most baptized. Like, what's the worst thing you ever ate on a missions trip? That's the conversation I want to have. What's the worst sermon that you've ever taught, and why? And I think not only will we enjoy that story, but I think we'll learn something from it. So, dear listeners and watchers, thanks so much for being a part of this today. If there's anything we can do to help you in any way, connect you with any resource, any help, any knowledge, any wisdom, that's what we're here for. We're here for you. And so we are praying for you. We love you. And just go get them this week as you continue to lead from alignment.